Good evening, everybody. I hope you all are able to see me and hear me. A very warm welcome to all of you to this session on MS Excel Beyond Functions. We have with us the speaker for the day, Mr. Viswanath. Before we go on to the session, I give the opportunity to our chairperson to share a few words that he wishes to make, a few announcements that he has. Over to you, Santosh.
Thank you very much, CS Tanumurthy. Dear members, Honorable Speaker, Mr. or CA Viswanathan, and invited guests and overseas chapter members, very good evening.
Very good evening.
Today, we are having another seminar on Excel, since Excel is our bread and butter. Not only bread and butter, even biryani and all other dishes also for us, it's Excel. Okay, most of our technical analysis are using Excel and related tools. Therefore, it is always important for us to have expert knowledge in Excel application. Today, we are fortunate to have an expert in Excel and make us understand its utility during our day-to-day works. Let me welcome CA Viswanathan to BCICAI technical events. I also welcome each and every members of BCICAI to this technical event. Also, some of our invited guests, overseas chapter members, especially Kuwait chairman Deepak Bindal is joined. I welcome each one of you to this event. Before proceeding, I would like to have some information or announcement regarding recent BCICAI initiatives or the initiatives which is going to come in the days. First of all, very big thank you and congratulations for CA Sharmila to conclude the second Women International Conference in a very, very successful manner. I also would like to thank you other women volunteers who helped to make this event a very successful one. It was everybody who attended appreciated the logistic arrangement, the way speakers are arranged, the topics they covered, an excellent job. Also, I would like to appreciate CA Arun and the entire CSR committee for organizing blood donation camp in King Hamad University Hospital. It was a very successful and nice, it's a humankind serving event. Thank you very much for that. And also have a few more announcements about the events which come. 22nd, we are going to have our football league, BCICAI Football League 2022. And May 1st, we are planning to have our May Day labor camp visit and food distribution. Maybe I will reach out to each of you for doing the donation and support. In addition to BCICAI this year, we would like to members also to participate into this cause and initiative. We'll reach out to you in the coming days. And I would request members to note down another important event is going to come is in 13th May. We are planning to celebrate BCICAI Family Day. It is going to be in the LPOD, and please note this date in your calendar and their family participate and make sure that this event is a memorable one for all of us. And also another technical event we are planning in the end of this month or the first part of next month. These are some of the events lined up from the BCICAI counter, and stay tuned for further information. Thank you very much for the patient listening, and I will give the control back to CS Tanumurthy to take the event further.
Thank you, CA Santosh. Thank you, everybody. Well, as CA Santosh mentioned, our chairperson mentioned that our bread and butter, biryani, whatever you want to say, is Excel. So most often than not, what happens is we learn the new formulas, we learn the latest developments and the enhancements that come as part of the Microsoft releases, especially those who have subscribed to Office 365, also known as Microsoft 365, and are brought to speed in terms of the latest functions. However, what happens is we understand the function, not necessarily understanding that there are a lot more logic and algorithms that is, if well understood, can be used across various different projects, reports, and other Excel related activities that we do. To give us more understanding on that, we have with us a speaker, a professional, and an academician. CA Viswanathan is having over 16 years of experience and is the founder and executive director of Profectus Learning and Talent Solutions Private Limited. It's also known as short name is Profectus. He's worked across multiple industries in a variety of roles and has consistently excelled in his work. Now, his multidisciplinary experience, along with his academic inclinations, has helped him provide solutions that are top-notch and industry relevant solutions. And he's a recognized expert in financial modeling and analytics. He's also played key roles in competence mapping, ISO 27001 implementation, and in driving process improvement initiatives. He, as part of the business, as part of his consulting services, provides financial modeling and analytics related solutions to his client. Now, he's also a recognized trainer and has conducted over 6,000 hours of training for various organizations, including BNP Paribas, Citigroup, Ernst & Young, HSBC, Shapoorji Pallonji, Vodafone, and many others, to name a few. Without further ado, I welcome and I give the stage to CA Viswanathan M B to take us through the proceedings of the day. Over to you, sir.
Welcome. Thank you very much, CA Stanamurthy, and also thank you very much, Chairman CA Santosh. So hi, good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining after your office hours. I think, after a long day, I really appreciate you joining us. So I'll quickly get started. As CA Stanamurthy already very aptly explained the objective of this program. A lot of them, we understood a lot of functions. I have a query often, people coming to me and telling me that, I know sum ifs, I know VLOOKUP, I know XLOOKUP, I know offset, I know every function. I need something more advanced. And I'm like, these are all the functions that I use myself. I don't use anything beyond this. I don't even use offset for that matter. Right. So when people come and say, I know everything, but I need more advanced, then what I realized is, where is the issue is mainly because it's not about functions. It's about the thinking process, and even bigger issue is with the data arrangement. So I'll quickly share my screen and I'll get started. Just one moment. Yeah. So what I'm going to do is, before I talk about these introductions and other things, first, let's talk about, what I call as the problem of dimensions. This is something that I always, focus on, because in your Excel file, we essentially have two dimensions, a row dimension and a column dimension. There are only two dimensions as such. But in real life, what happens is we have a lot more dimensions to our data. And while I was thinking about what appropriate case study to mention, I actually came across something that I worked long time back for a NGO. And I thought, that would also be a good illustration to talk about. So this is, of course, made up data. This is not the actual data. It's very sanitized. Company's name have changed. Amounts have been changed. So think of this way. What this NGO was doing was it was collating information about funds collected from different donors for different purposes. And I have with me only 12 months of data. So they have around, let us say, 6 different funds for which they collect money. And these money come from different types of donors. Some are corporates, some are trusts, some are individuals. So they maintain data like this. I mean, think of this way. How else would you maintain? You want to collect data, right? Your tally will give you the information, tally ERP, whatever you follow. But if you want to keep it in an Excel file, I want to know how much amount I collected from which donor towards which fund in which month. How do we organize it? Most of the time, this is how people end up organizing it, right? And they also had another set of data, which is about expenditure. So these are the donors who gave me money, and here is an expenditure that I've incurred towards, let's say, in various slums across, let us say, in a couple of cities in India. Again, which fund did I spend, in which site did I spend this money, and I have this information. Now, if I were to ask you questions like these things, how much of these funds were raised from CSR in 2021? How are we going to answer this question? Luckily for us, this data is arranged in proper, it's sorted by order. So you may probably be able to quickly select this and sum it up. But what if this was not sorted appropriately? And if we were to ask what is the total amount you spent, let's say CSR and trust, or let us say if I want to ask how much money we collected from Reliable Inc. let us say till June 2021, how much of that we have spent till June 2021. Keep in mind, when we spend the money, we didn't spend it for any particular donor. We spend it towards causes. So how are we going to answer these questions? So there are a few more questions that I have here, right? If you want to look at, is there any fund in which I spent too much money than what I collected, because that indicates diversion of funds, right? I collected money towards, let's say, fighting hunger and I spent it towards school stationery. That's again a diversion of funds. If I want to understand that, how do I do that? Because if I look, or we can do that, of course, all of us are trained to do that, but how much time do you think it's going to take us? So how much money I took from each of these funds till, let's say, June 2021, how much I spent, where are the overspending? It could be about June, it could be about May. I mean, what running total, because at no point in time I should have exceeded. Now, these are all things where people end up coming to me and asking me questions about, how do I handle these things? I had another similar situation long time back with another client who had data like this, right? They had a lot of play schools. They were running a network of play schools across, let's say, India. And they have various branches, and in each branch, they have different classes. And they wanted to do a P&L analysis of each of these class in each of these branch across years. Now, how do you organize this in a spreadsheet to analyze this? Most of us would probably think of organizing it this way. But keep in mind, just for 1 year, if I have 50 branches, I'm going to have 5 columns for one branch, because there are 4 sections and there's a summation. And if I have to have it for 50 branches, I'm going to have 250 columns. And if I have to have it for 5 years, I'll have 1250 columns, which is not a problem. But question is, how are we going to do the analysis? And this is the place where a lot of issues happen. And this is what we want to address in this training session, right? The functions we're going to learn are not necessarily something very new. There are a few things we learn, like power queries and power pivot, which some of you may not have been fully exposed to. But as far as a lot of Excel functions are concerned, if you're a proficient user, you will probably have already learned it. But that's why, we've titled this Beyond Functions. So we're going to understand how do we tackle this. But before I go into it, excuse me, let me talk about a few terminologies that I'm going to use here in this class. Firstly, I'm going to talk about something called a scalar variables. What does scalar mean? Scalar means this has only one value, right? So if I go into my simple operation sheet here, so if somebody were to ask me, what is the reporting units in Indian rupee? Let's look at this data point here. If somebody were to ask me a question on what is the reporting units of Indian rupee, that is just one data. It's in millions, right? I have answer, or it's in crores. I have that answer here, one single cell. In our case, if somebody were to ask us, what's your date of birth? There is only one answer to that, right? These are scalar variables. What's a vector? Vector is basically a variable which has more than one value, but you organize a vector simply into one single row or one single column. So when I look at, what if somebody were to ask me a question on what is my sales of, what is the quantity sold of various products? Now that's not a one single value. Quantity sold is 3 different values. If somebody were to tell me, give me a report on quantity sold, I'm going to give milk biscuit, cream biscuit, cookies. There's going to be one column of data. Similarly, if someone were to ask me a question, give what are the exchange rates? It's one row of data. So this variable called exchange rate has 3 values to it. This is what we call as a vector. Now, what is a matrix? A matrix is basically an arrangement where you have more than one row and more than one column. So if I were to get items like these, so for example, let us say I have my sales, right? This is how we normally do the calculation. So I'm already doing this. So my sales in Indian rupee is still a vector. But if I were to convert this into USD, now what I have here is a matrix. Not USD, across all the 3 exchange rates. Now this, what we have is a matrix, because give me sales in foreign currency. If somebody were to ask me that question, here I have 3 products in 3 different currencies. So I'm giving you a data that's multiple rows and multiple columns. This is what we call as a matrix. We also have something called as arrangement. Sorry, array. What is an array, and how is an array different from vector or a matrix? Array essentially refers to everything. What we saw here is also an array, but array is basically one variable that has multiple values. It can be multiple rows or multiple columns. But a key difference between array is that array is not resizable. An array size is typically fixed and we cannot resize this. That's about array. Now, just one thing, should we take the questions as we go along or should we take the questions at the end? CS Tanamurthy, if you have any thoughts on that?
Generally what we do is we go in the flow of the speaker so that you don't miss out or you are able to communicate what you do need to. But the choice is yours. If you wish that you want to have it as an interactive session where you want the participants to unmute themselves and ask question, we can do that as well. So I've just allowed everybody to unmute themselves. The choice is yours. If you choose to continue directly, we are welcoming that. And generally questions are asked, so people are aware that they will put the questions in the chat box. You also will be able to see them when they put it in the public for everyone to see. But if you choose, you want people to interrupt or ask you questions so that they are clearer on the concepts being spoken about, we can do that as well. So right now, everybody has got the opportunity to unmute themselves. The floor is back to you, sir.
Sure, thank you. Then I'll just wait for a minute if anyone has any questions on this, because I would, if you have questions, ask right away, because we are going to talk something that's relatively new. So if you don't understand something initially, you may not understand it even later on. So any questions, any thoughts, let me know. Okay.
Participants can unmute themselves if they wish to.
All right. Now, what I would like to do is I would like to talk about, if there are no questions, I'll just continue. Let's talk about, what are the various approaches to work with Excel. A lot of us think, Office 365 is Excel is Excel. But I actually tell you, within Excel, we have 6 different Excel sitting inside one Excel. I'll explain each one of them as we go along. First one I would like to talk about is what I refer as scalar operation. Now, the scalar operation is how pretty much most of us work with Excel. So what's a scalar operation? Where basically what we do is every single cell is an individual entity and we give formula in each cell separately. You may achieve it by copy pasting, no doubt, but essentially we are giving separate formula in each cell. So what I did here, when I take sales in millions or sales in Indian rupee and divided by USD exchange rate, now this formula is individually, excuse me, yeah. So this formula is given in the cell and this cell is an independent entity. Now I may copy and paste this, but again, each cell is separate. I can delete some of the cells here and the rest of the cell will remain as it is, nothing changes. So here we treat each cell as a separate entity and that's why we call it as operation. The other operation that we can do is an array or within the scalar operation. Normally what we do is we refer to cells by their cell reference, A1, B1, etc. You may also want to refer to a cell using names. So one of the issue I have here is actually my quantities in crores and prices in crores. So quantity times price is going to give me answer in millions, right? Sorry, it's going to give me answer in crores because quantity is crores and price is crores. So this is going to be in crores, not million. Now I want to convert this crore into USD million. So what I have to do is I have to multiply all of them by 10. And I have a cell here called D6, which basically does calculation, converts crore into a million. I mean, crore divided by million. 10. So I have to multiply all by. What you can do is you can actually name a cell as well. I can name the cell as, let us say, now I'll call it as conversion factor nv.fctr. And once you have named a cell, you can actually use the name direct calculations. This is something that we can do here. I'll also open Excel 2010 so that I can show you side by side in terms of how the vector operations or how operations were different in previous versions and how was it different in Office 365. So we talked about scalar operation with cell reference. We talked about scalar operations with names. The next operation we're going to talk about is vector operations with what we call a CSC array. What is the CSC array? Now I'll copy paste this particular data I had into Office 2010 so that let's see how that one works.
Wish, I guess I think you'll need the row from 4 onwards so that you're able to do the multiplication. Otherwise, it will go for a toss. Ah, you're taking the full page itself. All right.
Yeah, I am copying the full page itself. Right. So I have copied the full page in Office 2010. So what we mean by array operation is, if you look at it, what I'm going to do is, earlier I gave separate formula in each of the cells. Now, instead what I'm going to do is, rather than having three separate formulas, I'm going to type one single formula, which is going to be quantity. And in quantity, I'm going to select all the three quantities and I'll multiply it by all the three prices. Now, in older versions, one cell can have only one value. If I press enter, it will throw a value error. Or in this case, it gave me answer only for first cell. How it understood which cell to multiply with which cell?
Sorry,
Okay, you're not
I
able
guess
to see
we
the screen?
Yeah, we still seeing the Office 365 only.
Okay. Just one moment. I'll share my entire screen. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah. So this is my Office 2010, which I also have with me here. So what I was referring is giving the formula in one single cell. So I'm going to give it as equals quantity multiplied by price. I select these three cells. Now in the older version, first and foremost, I'm talking about 3 rows multiplied by another 3 rows in another column. But in older version, one formula can give you only one answer. So when I press enter, in this case, it is just taking the first row and multiplying it with the first price. How did it know out of the three values, which value and which values to multiply with each other? It's doing it based on the intersecting row. So you're giving me 3 rows, but in this row in which you're putting the formula, there is only one, there is only one of those values, and it takes that 2 values. What can I do if I wanted this particular single cell to give me answer for all the 3 values? For that, you had to use Control Shift Enter. That's why we call it a CSE array. Control Shift Enter. C for control, S for shift, and E for enter. Now this formula, one single formula has given me all the 3 answers. This is an array. So here, if you look at it, all the 3 cells here are one single entity. You can't individually go and edit any individual cell. If I try to edit them, it is not going to let me edit. It's going to say you cannot change part of an array. So this is what an array is. Now earlier I also told you this is also a vector. So if in Office 365, you can do vector operations. How am I going to do the vector operation? Let me do it here. So I'm going to select these 3 cells. This is Office 365. Just switch my application. I'm multiplying with price. I am not doing Control Shift Enter. I'm just pressing Enter button alone here. This one cell automatically gave me all the 3 values, right? One single formula. I said these take 3 rows, multiply with another 3 rows. Excel did the calculation on its own. This is a vector. So what's the difference between an array and a vector? In an array, what happens is the size is fixed. Tomorrow, if I want to delete any row, I cannot delete it. It won't let me delete. If I want to insert anything here, I cannot. So array size is pretty much fixed. So that is why array operations were not very, people were not very fond of array operation, because a lot of time in Excel, data keeps adding. So tomorrow, if I were to have one more product called, let's say, donut, I'm having some 500 units sold at, it won't work. I mean, I can't copy paste this. It's not going to happen. I mean, it can happen, but then this is one separate array and this is a separate array and it doesn't look nice. If you want to extend this formula, you have to delete the array and you have to extend your formula and give this all over again, right? So that was a problem why array was not a preferred approach. But when you talk about vector, it is not that difficult. So later on, I'll also show you how you can easily add the 4th row as well. But for now, I'll insert donut in between. When I insert a row, you notice that a row got inserted on its own in a vector. And here, let me add a donuts here. Donuts, 500 units at 30 rupees each. And we've got the answer. So vectors automatically expand. Vectors can expand. Vectors can be, shrink. You can do anything with a vector. Array sizes were fixed. So array operations were not that popular earlier, but vector operations can do wonders to us. So this is about the difference between array and a vector. Any questions here? So what we understood here is, we talked about scalar operation. We talked about scalar operation with names. We talked about vector operations with CSE array. And we also talked about vector operations with dynamic array. What I did right now, what I called as vector operation is dynamic array. This dynamic array is available in Office 365. It is there in Office Online. It's there in Zoho Office. So Zoho, Office Online, Office 365, they work almost similarly. But when you talk about other options like Google Sheets, they also have vector operations with dynamic array, but there the formula is slightly different. The way you have to approach that is slightly different. But it's there in all your, even Google Sheets supports vector operations. Only thing is, you have to give the formula slightly differently. If you have any questions, any thoughts, let me know. All right. The next one that we are going to talk about is vector operation with tables. What is this vector operations with tables? So here, I'll just very quickly show you this calculation that I have here in vector operation with tables. So in a vector operation with table, it's essentially a scalar operation which Excel makes it into a vector. So let us say I have milk biscuit, I have quantity and price. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take quantity and multiply it by price. First and foremost, you notice that in tables, the cell reference don't work. I mean, it works, but it doesn't look like a cell reference. When I type a formula called quantity times price and I press enter, that one formula automatically gives me automatically give me answers for all the 4 columns, right? Or rather 4 rows. Now, if I were to go and modify anything, see, keep in mind when you do a scalar operation where each cell is an individual entity, if you were to do any modification, let's say I wanted to multiply it by 10. So I'm multiplying one of the rows by 10, other rows are not getting multiplied by 10. So because it's a scalar operation, you can individually operate on a particular cell. But in a vector operation, what is going to happen is if you try operating, if I try multiplying one of them by 10, you'll see I'll multiply all of them by 10. So this is how you work with vectors if using tables. So we saw dynamic array. Dynamic array is there only in, as I told you, in the latest versions. Table started in Office 2007. That's when table first made an entry. Before that also we had something very close to table called as list, but proper table made its entry in 2007, and from there it's grown pretty fast, and it's now a completely different ball game today. Most likely we'll have time to demonstrate the power of table when we go into the same problem I talked about earlier, that NGO problem. When you organize it in a different way, how can we handle it? We'll understand it there. So, but this is about vector operations with tables. I will wait for a moment here. Any questions, any thoughts, let me know.
Yeah, Bish, I would want you to just stop for a moment.
Sure.
All the members here are chartered accountants and have got experience working in Excel, but I'm sure we are learning something very different from what we have seen so far in the usual Excel courses. One of the reasons for this session is to help understand how Excel works so that it makes our life much more easier. So what we have just covered is on the screen. If any of you have any doubts, you can directly unmute yourself and ask the question. You don't need to go through the chat mode. The session is kept open for all to unmute yourselves. The intent is that if you understand this portion, I'm sure what's going to come forward will be self-explanatory. But if there are some doubts or something that you feel you need to have understanding, I believe right now is the time to ask the question. So I think we can give about 2 minutes. Is that okay with you, sir?
Sure.
Yeah, so we'll give 2 minutes. Have a look at what's there on the screen. If any of you have any questions, please unmute yourself and ask the question.
Hi, Viswanathan. Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for the session. Just a small silly question. How do you make a normal table into a vector? I mean, we understand what a vector does, but how do you make that table into a vector one?
We will understand it. So I'm just giving you an introduction. Okay. So we will understand that shortly. Sure. Right? We will get into that. Right. Yeah. Any other questions? All right. So now I'll do one thing. In fact, because I wanted to start with that, I didn't do it because some of you may also be wondering at this juncture, what is it that I'm going to learn today? So let me give you a very quick teaser on that, right? So what we're going to be doing is, I gave you this example of, this donor. I have data here and I want to have questions on, did we overspend on any particular fund than what we collected? Because that means that money has come from some other fund or somewhere we ran deficit. These kind of questions, whatever questions you see here, I'm going to show you how to find answers to these things in probably, less than 5 minutes and without even typing a formula, right? I'm not even going to use a formula. How do we find answer to this? Without any formula, I'm going to make Excel do this task for us, right? We are going to do that. Of course, for that I haven't come to that part as to, what are the solutions to this. There are two parts to it, two approaches. I'll talk about that shortly, but that's what we're going to do. The other thing I'm going to do is I am going to talk about certain very advanced mathematical operations that can help us crunch large number of calculations into one single cell. So for example, if I want to quickly show you a bond valuation. So I have a bond valuation here, which I have to do, I have cash flows, I have discount rates, and I have to get the valuation. And the way to do it is take the cash flow and divide it by the interest rate raised to the power number of years, and do this calculation across 4 cells and sum it up. And is there a way I can do this with one single formula rather than doing this entire calculation? How do we do that? We'll understand that. A lot of time when you build Excel, most of the Excel files are, I have seen a lot of files which will be marked delicate. They'll be, do not delete this cell, do not delete this row, do not sort the data. But today we handle large amounts of data, and when you have 10 data points, you can expect your client or your boss to scroll through the 10 data and look at things. But when you have 10,000 data, they wouldn't want to scroll through. They probably would do a filter. They'll do a sort. Can I ensure that my formula doesn't go for a toss when I filter and sort? That's what we're going to understand here. And we are going to understand one more case that's not there in the Excel file, which is basically, what if I have data that's more than 1 million rows of data and coming from various sources? How do I bring them all together and how do I analyze them? And can I do it with Excel? Can Excel handle it? We'll also understand that, right? This is what we're going to be doing today. And of course, for that, there are certain fundamental principles we have to understand. So let us also understand that principle. So I'm starting with those principles basically, but these are the tasks that we'll eventually be achieving. So before we go on, any questions, any other thoughts? All right. Now I'm going to very first give you a teaser on vector operation itself. Then we'll understand how to do this. I'll start with the problem of dimensions, right? So what do I have here? This case study. I have 3 bonds, their cash flows, and I have their interest rates. So this is a financial concept. How do you do, if those of you involved in, let's say, if you're doing IFRS 9 reporting or any other reason you're involved in financial markets, you would perhaps do this calculation often. So what I need to do is I need to find out the fair value of this bond. And to get the fair value, I have to get present value of each of the cash flows. I have different interest rates. It's not one single interest rate. Then if it's one interest rate, NPV functions, PV functions, they can handle it. But I have different interest rates. So each year has different interest rates. So I have to discount each of the cash flows separately and I have to sum them up. Now, what is big deal? I mean, you can just do this here. I mean, bond 1, 2, 3, do it and we are done, right? What's the challenge really? The challenge is that, and that's where I talked about the problem of dimension. See, we have one row. I mean, we have 2 dimensions, rows and columns. Now, typically, if rows take one type of data and columns can take another type of data. When you have multiple types of data, more than 2 types of data, where will you keep it? Because here, the rows represent the time period. 1, 2, 3, 4 is a time period for me. The columns, each column represent a separate item. So bond 1 has one column with bond 1's cash flow. Bond 2 has one column with its cash flow. But when I take the present value of bond 1, I end up creating 2 columns for bond 1. And tomorrow somebody may ask me a question as to, I want to value bond 1, not at current rates, right? I want to look at current rate plus 1%. We have that as point B, right? Current rate plus 1%. If interest rate goes up by 1%, what will happen to my bonds valuation? Now, same bond 1 is now going to have 3 columns. Cash flow upon 1 plus interest rate plus another 1% to the power 1. So then I have bond 1. Same way, you will have one more column because I also want to understand what if spot interest rate decreases by 1%. What will happen to my bonds valuation? I want to do it for bond 2, bond 3. If you have 40 bonds like this, I'm doing an analysis. I'm going to have for each bond 3 columns. Your Excel file is going to have pretty long set of columns. It's going to become pretty messy because later on then you will want to identify which of the bonds lose the most. Get me a summary of that. Which bonds lose the most money if interest rate increases? It's going to be a pretty complicated task for us. So how do I handle this? One way to avoid this particular having too many columns is through vector operations. So what did we do here? I took the cash flow, one cash flow, divided by 1 plus interest rate raised to the power 1. This is what I did for each one of them. And then I'm summed up all the 4. Let me show how I'm going to do it with one single formula. If you're using new version, it's very easy. So I could simply put summation of what did I sum up? Cash flow divided by 1 plus interest rate raised to the power n. So I'm going to select all my cash flows. So instead of selecting one cell, I'm going to select all the 4 divided by 1 plus interest rate. Rather than selecting one single cell, again, because there are 4 cash flows, I'm going to select all 4 of them and I'll raise it to the power the interest rates. The same 120.08 you saw there, I have it here, right? That's it. Right? How is it working? I will explain that, right? How this is working, how is it able to do that? We'll explain that shortly. That is where vector operations we have to understand. So bond 2, bond 3, one single cell. So this is at current interest rate. Now, if I want to look at, what if interest rate goes up by 1%, what happens? Pretty much the same formula. Only thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add 1 more percent to this. Take these interest rates, add 1% to it. What if interest rate decreases by 1%? It's all in one single column. So bond 1 is not taking multiple columns. And this problem we'll understand, when we are dealing with small set of data, we don't really appreciate this keeping ensuring that we don't overuse dimensions. But when you have large set of data, this is going to become a problem for us, right? I didn't use any complex functions here. If you look at it, I used addition, subtraction, multiplication, division actually, addition, division, and exponentials, one small sum function, but I could cover everything in just one single cell and I'm done, right? So this is the power of vector operations. You can save on dimensions, and because most of us don't handle more than 2 dimensions, we struggle to handle it, and that is where we're going to have a problem. So one solution is vector operations. Another solution is through what we call as data normalization. That is something I will do at the end, where we are going to tackle this same case study. But as I said, how are we going to handle that very quickly? We'll do that. So now, how did this work? How did this manage to do all the calculations in one single cell? For that, let's understand how vectors operate in Excel. So let me go back to this example. So let us see what is happening. So in a vector, when you take one vector and multiply it with another vector, how vector operation happens? How does Excel know? There are 3 rows in one cell, and there are 3 in another. Which one to multiply with which one? How does Excel understand? How do I do the operation? Since first and foremost, let's understand both of them are same type of vectors. They both are vertical vectors or column vectors. They have one column, multiple rows. So in that case, what it does is it takes the first value of the first vector and operates with the first value of the second vector. Similarly, it takes the second value of second vector, first vector, and second value of second vector, and so on. And that is how we get the answer. What we got, stem, one cell at a time, right? So you specify the vector and Excel will automatically handle it, right? It knows which corresponding items to be operated with which item. Now, the next thing we're going to understand is, we understood vector with vector, what happens. One type of vector with another type of vector, what happens. Now, let us understand one more thing, which is vector with scalar. Now, keep in mind, my quantity is in crores, price is in millions, prices is in units. When I take a product that is going to be in crores, I want the answer in millions, which means I need to multiply it by 10. 10 is a scalar value. It has only one value here, right? Conversion factor 10 is one single cell. So what happens when I multiply a vector with a scalar value, like conversion factor here? Now, since there is only one value and vector has three values, how does it know which value should be multiplied with this 10? It multiplies every value with 10, right? When you do a scalar operation on a scalar value, if you take a scalar data and operate it on a vector, every single item in that vector get operated with the same value. So now, since 10 is a scalar data, all items in the vector will be multiplied with that 10 and we get our answer here, right? I'll pause for a minute because this could be a little confusing and the next one is going to be even more confusing. So any questions? All right. Now let's understand. So what we have understood so far is vector with vector what happens and vector with scalar what happens. We have understood these two things. Now let's understand one more, which is vector, a column vector with row vector. In that case, what happens? So if you look at it, what I'm going to do is I have the sales values, which is a column vector, and I have exchange rate, which is a row vector. Now, if I operate these two together, what will happen? Because I need to multiply this. The Indian rupee, I need to divide it by. I'll explain the hash sign shortly, right? For now, don't bother about the hash sign. I'll take it as E24 to E26. I'll divide it by 7590. What is going to happen here? What's going to happen is, because one is a column vector, another is a row vector, every item in this vector, so every item in this vector will be operated with every item in the row vector. So I'm going to get 28,800 upon 75, 28,800 divided by 100, 28,800 divided by 90, 54 divided by 75, 54 by 100, and 54 by 90. That is what is going to happen. So when I press enter, this is going to give me a matrix. One single formula, right? One single formula. This is going to give us a matrix. Any questions? Any thoughts? I'll pause for a second. Okay. Just give me one moment. I think I'll have to connect my laptop to the power cord. Just give me one. Very sorry for that. So any other questions, thoughts?
Just one question.
Sure.
You said in the earlier example on conversion factor 10, when you multiply it in the sales column, INR millions, it multiplies it with both the quantity and the price, or only the price? How does it know it has to multiply only with the price?
It's not multiplying it with price.
Okay.
It's multiplying it with this final value. So it's
okay.
So think of this. This is going to give me one output, right?
Right.
This is going to give me one output. It multiplies all the. So this is going to give me three outputs, correct? C24 to multiplied by D24, C25, D25, C26, D26. So it takes all those values and multiplies it by 10. So what it does is when I say it multiplies all the value, it multiplies with all the three rows here.
Okay. Got it.
Right.
Thank
and
you.
You don't multiply it by 10, it multiplies that by each of the three rows.
So it multiplies by the output of that particular formula.
Yes. Correct.
Okay. Got it. Thank you.
Right. Yeah.
In as many rows or as many columns. So for example, if Vish was to take up the same formula and apply it in the formula, this is F24, then automatically it will apply not just on F24, but F24 to H24 and all the way up to F26 to H26. Is my understanding correct, Vish? Am I getting it right?
Yes. You're absolutely right. Right. So
Thanks.
So we understood how vectors operate. Now let's graduate to matrix, right? So we are not doing, when I say matrix here, I'm talking about a data set with multiple rows and multiple columns. We are not going to do our school day matrix for now, not the matrix multiplication. That's not what we're going to do. But we are going to operate on a matrix which has multiple rows and multiple columns. Let us see how that one works. So if I were to, let's say tomorrow, my boss thinks, it's better if I get all these values in, let's say, thousands rather than getting it in millions. So that means I need to multiply all these values by 1,000. For a moment, I don't have it in any cell. I'll type it directly here. Whether you have it in a cell or you directly type, the 1,000 is a scalar because 1,000 has only 1,000, right? Whereas here the matrix has 9 values. The 1,000 is just one single 1,000. There is not many thousands. Or let me also keep it in a cell actually. So let me put the multiplier in a separate cell as 1,000. Now, when I multiply these values with 1,000, what you'll notice is which of these 9 cells will get multiplied by 1,000. So this formula produces 9 results. Which of the 9 will get multiplied by 1,000? A scalar, when you operate on a matrix, it operates on every single element. So when you have a vector or a matrix, right? When you have we call it in Office 365, it's called dynamic array because its size can automatically expand. The CSC array, which I showed you, if you remember earlier, doesn't expand, whereas this one automatically expands. So we call it as a dynamic array. So when you apply on a dynamic array, whether it's a vector or a matrix, when you apply a scalar on them, that scalar applies on every single value of that matrix. That is what we have here. All right. Now, let's talk about the next one, which is, let us say what I want to do is I want to get the price of each of these 3 products in 3 different currencies, right? And I want it in the lower numbers, let's say. Right. Let me keep it as 1. Now, of course, getting the price, the easiest way to do it is to take all these 3 and divide it by these exchange rates. And I probably want it in cents and pence rather than in actual USD, because in USD, the numbers are going to be too small. So I'll multiply this by 100. So this is the easiest way to get. But let's say for some reason, my analyst thinks they want to divide the sales value by quantity. So now what is going to happen is my sales value here, this is a matrix. Again, I'll not use the array option. I'll go with F25 times F27. Sorry, H27. I'll avoid the hash sign. So I have F25 to H27. And if I divide it by quantity, because sales by quantity will give me my selling price. So sales upon quantity, when I do it. Now, if you think of it, my sales is a matrix, quantity is a vector. So what happens when you operate a vector on a matrix? Now this vector will apply, if it's a column vector, this vector will apply on every single column of the matrix. So it's going to take column F, multiply it by column C. Column G will be not multiplied, divided. Column F will be divided by column C. Column G will be divided by column C. Same way H will be divided by column C. And I'm going to get the answer here. It was already multiplied by 10 to get the millions, I think. So I'll multiply it by one more 10. So I can get this answer here, right? So when you operate a vector with matrix, that same vector will apply on every single item of the matrix. So if it's a column vector, it will apply on every single column. If it's a row vector, it will apply on every single row of the matrix. Any questions? Any thoughts? All right. Now, next thing that we're going to understand is, how do I work with, if I were to work with irregular shaped vectors, because we talked about when we operated here, my vectors were of same size. And similarly, when I created a matrix and I wanted to do it, we worked with something of same size. But, real life comes with its own ugly complications. Now, just for the sake of it, just to understand, let's say my price has 4 values. Quantity has only 3 values. Now, if I were to take the price and multiply it by a scalar unit, like a, let's say 10, that scalar unit will apply on every item of the price. But if I take two vectors, right? These both are vectors, but their sizes are irregular. One has 3 elements, another one has 4 elements. Now, what is going to happen? Now, what is going to happen is Excel, wherever it could match the elements, it will give you the correct answer. Where it cannot match, it'll throw a not available error. So this is what is happening to me. So the first 3 elements it could match. So I got the answer. The 4th element I couldn't match. So it gave us an error here, right? So this is what happens when you deal with irregular sized, when I operate on 2 matrices, where one matrix, let's say, has 2 columns, another one has 3 columns. Then what it will do, first 2 columns it'll take the corresponding values and work on it. And the third value, it won't work on it. It will not work on it correctly. That is what is going to happen to us. Any questions? Any thoughts? All right. So we've understood the foundation. Yeah, sorry, please go ahead.
Hi, this is Srini with you. If you don't mind, can you go to J25?
Sure.
Yeah. So here, okay. Here we have using the multiplication as well. 10.
Right. I'm multiplying it by 10. Correct. I'm multiplying.
Okay. Okay. Got it.
Right.
Thank you so much.
Sure. So now that we have understood the foundation principles of how vectors operate, let's go ahead and understand the entire architecture, because this is something that not all of us understand. We have to understand these principles. Only then when we talk about tables, power queries, power pivots, everything, things will start making sense to us. So now that we've understood, let's first understand what is happening in terms of our formula that we just did earlier. How did it give the answer? Let's look at what we are doing here. So we said D30 to D33 upon 1 plus C30 to C33. So how does it know which this interest rate to use as denominator for which value in my numerator? It is going to take corresponding values. D30, for that the interest rate will take it from C30. For D33, it will take it from C33, and so for the in-between values. Similarly, when I take exponential, what should I take as the term? How do I know? Again, because these are all vectors, it picks up the corresponding value. For the first item, D30, interest rate it takes a C30 and raises it to the power 1, which is B30. For the last item, D33, divided by 1 plus C33, raised to the power B33. So this is going to produce me these, if I press F9, you will see the result. So this is going to produce me these 4 values, which we calculated earlier. And the sum function then sums up all of them, right? Some of these calculation, part of this, you could have done it in old version as well. In Excel 2010 also, you could have tried it. But only thing is you should have used some product function rather than sum function. So a sum function may not work. So instead what we could have done is I could have used a sum product function here. Sum product was the only function in the old version which was capable of handling arrays and vectors. So I could have done that here. Take these values divided by 1 plus all these interest rates raised to the power all these terms. So a sum product, if I'd used a sum function, that would not have worked. It would have thrown me an error. But sum product was capable of handling this function. And since there is nothing to multiply, right? In a sum product function, it takes 2 arrays, does a multiplication, gives the answer. But here there is nothing to multiply. So it just gives the value as it is. So in the old version also, we could have done this. Only difference is we should have used a sum product function, right? But old version, the final output had to be a scalar unit. The final output had to be a scalar. I could not have got a vector there. So like what I got here. In here with one formula, I could get all the answers. That would not have been possible in old versions, but vector operation was still possible if the final answer was only 1. That we could have still done that. All right. Now let's understand a few things in terms of applications. How do we work with it? Firstly, if you have to work properly with vector operations, how do you store the data? We don't want to store the data in cells. Why we don't want to store it in cells? Because in a cell, what happens is, now what I got here is a fantastic vector, no doubt, right? One formula which I can easily, I showed you that I could insert a row in between and it expands. But a lot of them, you can't expect your end users to correctly insert the row and do it. They would probably come here and type donut 530. This is what they would do. But my formula is not expanding because my formula is referring to a static range. So when you're working with vector operations, what can we do here? Firstly, store your data as a table. How do I make my data into a table? And let's also understand something about tables. So what you do is, let me just pay special this value here. There, it's already a table. If you have the data, select the data and press Ctrl T, that's the shortcut key, or go to Insert tab and click on Tables. If your table doesn't have a heading, you can say my table doesn't have a heading. So Excel will automatically insert a header row with dummy headings like column 1, column 2, and you can choose the heading. So our table has a heading. So I'll keep my table as header, click OK, and we are done. Right? The table, how do I know this is a table? There are two ways to know that this is a table. One is, if you carefully notice at the end of the table, you have a demarcation here, which tells you this inverted L mark, which tells you that this is a table. And another way to know this is a table is select the table and go to the table design. I mean, when you select the table, you will see this table design tab contextual menu automatically appear. That tells you this is a table, right? Now tables are automatically given some names by Excel. So Excel here has given a name as table 8. This is the name that Excel has given. Now, if you want, you can change the name. So I don't want to call it as table 8. I want to call it as, let's say, sales or something. You can just go here and type that name. Table name will change. I have already named this table as table. Okay, it's table 55. Let me call it as sales. Or let me actually call this as sales. So this is how you create something into a table, and this is how table gets stored. Now, when you work on something with table, by default, the banded rows come. But if you don't like it, if you think, okay, I would like to keep my formatting plain, I don't like these banded rows, you have in table design tab, you have a lot of designs to choose from. You can give your own design as well. You can customize the design as well. For now, I am happy to take this. I'll choose this. In a table, theoretically, you can work on a table just like you work on a cell, but it is not preferable. By default, table has certain behaviors which you can alter by going to file options and changing that option, but it's not preferable. So in a table, what is the default behavior? The default behavior is every column can either be an input column or it can be a formula column. So if I want sales value, now this is going to be a formula column. So this is going to be, let's say, in Indian rupee. So I can take quantity times price, and that gives me sales in Indian rupees, right? I mean, and this is what I'm getting, and this got automatically applied in all four of them. So this is a formula column, right? I can change this default behavior. I can go and say, no, don't do this. Don't create this colored column. I can change this in the autocorrect options, but I wouldn't recommend that. That's not a good idea because this brings a certain discipline, right? You can't add some suspense account values to your balance sheet and tally the balance sheet, right? You can't add some 0.5 because my balance sheet is not tallying, not allowed. That ensures that your file is reliable, right? When you follow that. So that is one thing. So that is not, it's not a good idea to change the behavior of the table. So let it be like this. Now, when you're working with table, my table is already taking care of things. So why do I need a dynamic array, right? Because table seems to be easy. But firstly, there are few things complicated about table as well. What is it? When I select a table, you notice that, it's not reading as C54 to times D54. It's saying @ quantity times @ price. What is this? Quantity is the name of the column. Who gave the name? We gave it. I mean, right here, it's quantity, QTY. If I call it as volume, then this column name becomes volume, right? You just change the name and it changes. So when you go and select something like, I want quantity, and in this case, the quantity column is in the same table where I've typed the formula. So if I go and type my quantity here, right, when I select this quantity, the quantity automatically happens. I press enter. So I mean, in this case, when I select elsewhere, what is happening is it gives me quantity column in sales table. Notice that how it's reading is, sales quantity. What does this sales indicate? That's the name of this table. Who called this table as sales? A few minutes back, I changed the name here, right? So what we are saying is in the sales column, give me the quantity column of sales table. When you refer a quantity column, it gives you the entire column. What if I wanted to say I only want data in the current row of the quantity column, not the entire column? Then what you do is you use the @ sign. The @ sign ensures that you are referring to current row of the quantity column. Right? So when you see @ quantity multiplied by @ price, it is essentially referring to current row of the quantity column multiplied by current row of the price column. That is what is happening here. So when you press enter, we've got the answer. If you're not comfortable working with table reference, but you still like tables because the formula automatically spills, one option for you is you can go to file and then go to options. In the formula section, there is an option here where it says use table names in formula. If you uncheck this, because there are people who are comfortable working with cell reference, they don't want this names. It's a little confusing. You can use this. Uncheck this box. When you uncheck this box, this will still work like a table. When I give a formula right now, it's reading as C54 times D54. But when I press enter, you will notice that the table automatically expands. Right? The formula automatically spills. So you can do that. But I am a fan of working with structural reference, which is what we call it as structural reference when you work with table names. So I'll use that. All right. So, and by the way, even if you have structural reference, you can refer it by cell reference. So right now, if I say @ quantity, it gives me quantity in structural reference. If I type C54, it will still give me the same reference. You can still use it. So the file option is about what should happen by default. When you select the cell, when you don't type the formula and select the cell, what should Excel do? Should it put the structural reference? Should it put the cell reference? That's what that option does, but you can still work with it like a normal cell or structural reference, irrespective of what the option says. All right. Now, if my table is automatically spreading, and in table, what you would notice is if I add one more product, let's say buns, right? I'm also introducing a new product, buns, 1050, the answer automatically expands. So, table works absolutely fine. So why do I need a dynamic array? The problem is, when it comes to exchange rates. Now, right now, or a few years ago, how I would have done it is if I wanted the exchange rates, you can't do it like the way you do it with scalar cell references. I can't have exchange rate typed here and put the formula below this, because as I told you, in a table, you can either have an input column or a formula column. That's the ideal thing to have. In this case, why I can't make it into a table is the exchange rate is typed. It's an input and this is a formula and there are blank rows. Right? That's not how table works. In table, it has to be consistent. So what can I do about working with in this case, if I want exchange rates, you need to have your exchange rates in a separate column, in a separate table. So I'll have USD, GBP, and Euro in a separate table. Right. And for a moment, let me do one thing. Let me just have USD. Let's say, when I started, I only had USD here. Right. So now how do I get sales in USD in this table? Because that USD is not here. Right. I'll have USD and GBP. I'll have two currencies, USD and GBP. Now, how do I get this? So one thing you can do is I'll have put in USD. It would not be a good idea because see, this is also a table, right? If it was only one currency, then it's a scalar value. Then you can as well go and say, 2880 into 75 and freeze that cell. Sorry, not in multiplied, divided by 75. Things are going to work for us. But tomorrow, what would happen is, I've got this USD and my boss comes and says, I also want GBP and I also want Euro. Now, what do you do about that? That's where, rather than, right now, what is going to happen is when my boss adds this, I will have to come to this table, add a column in GBP, in euro. I have to do this. In dynamic array, I can even avoid this. And that is what we're going to see shortly, how we can make this, therefore, entire thing into an app. We're going to make this entire thing completely into an app, and let's see how that's going to work. Let me not have the buns here. Now I'm going to do everything with dynamic array. I will not have this USD. Resizing a table is easy. Just drag this handle and move up and down. Table will get resized, right? Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to, let me pull out the products here, because why I'm going to use dynamic array for getting different currency is my currency data is coming from a different table. Sales data is coming from a different table. So dynamic array would be really awesome. It would be better if you are doing calculations coming from two different tables. So that's what we have here. We have data from two different tables, and each table can grow. And when each table grows, I want my data to grow. So what I'm going to do, I am going to now pull out all the four values. How? I'm going to do equals, product is going to be equal to, equals, I am not selecting C54. I am going to select equals sales product. When I say sales product column from sales table. Now product column from sales table has four values. So which value will Excel put here? It will create a dynamic array with all the four values, right? This one single formula has given me all the four values. If I want sales in INR, I'm going to put in INR, sales in INR equals, or I'll just put INR for now, equals these values, and they're in, right? Now, how do I get USD, GBP, and Euro? Let me do one thing. First, let's have just USD and GBP. What I told you is that, when I want, manually you can type USD and GBP, but that's not what we want. What I want is, whatever is the list of currencies, I want all the list. So if I manually type USD and GBP and type the formula, which is, how we would normally do. So this is how you would normally do. That's not how we are going to operate, because tomorrow my products can change, my list of currencies can change. So how am I going to do it? What I'm going to do is this. I'm going to say equals currencies. I'm going to table 68 currencies. I'll change the name of the table. I'll call it as FX rates. I'm going to say equals currencies. That has come. It has pulled both the currencies, but I don't want them one above the other. I want them one beside the other. I want them horizontally. How do I get that? What I'm going to do is, we have this function for a long time. This function has been in existence for a long time, but it becomes very powerful in transpose function. It becomes very powerful in Office 365. I put transpose, and you notice that both USD and GBP has come, right? Now, tomorrow, if I add euro to this list, the euro automatically comes, because when you expand your table, I didn't say I wanted data in cell C46 and 47. I said I want currency column of FX rates table. Now, when the currency column has three values, all the three values are picked up, and my transpose function gives me all the three values. All right. Now comes the next question, which is about how do I convert all these three values? I mean, how do I convert this Indian rupee sales into these exchange rates? For that, first, I have to pull out the exchange rates from this table. When you're working with dynamic array, we are completely going to shun direct cell reference as much as possible, right? And in most cases. So how do I get this rate? Because I don't want USD, GBP, Euro. I don't want to manually go and select, because if I go and manually select, as I said, if I go and manually select these ones, let me have only USD and GBP. If I manually select it, then what happens when tomorrow you add a euro here, right? Right now, euro doesn't even exist, and people add a euro. Maybe I will add a AED, right? So where will those exchange rates come from? So what I'm going to do is, I am going to use a XLOOKUP function, but I'll go in two steps here. How do I pull out the data? You can use XLOOKUP, or if you're all comfortable with VLOOKUP, you can also use VLOOKUP, right? I'll first use VLOOKUP. VLOOKUP for USD. In this table, I'm selecting the entire FX rates table. When you select the entire table, I'm not specifying any column, so it gives me the name of the table. You're looking for D16 FX rates table. And I want value from second row, absolute match. I'm getting 75. But what I want to tell Excel is that I am not looking just for D60, because the formula I gave in D60 didn't produce one currency, it produced multiple currencies. I want to look up for every single currency that, every single value that this formula in cell D60 produced. How do you specify that? If you remember, there was a hash sign that we kept encountering earlier, and I said ignore it for now. Let's deal with the hash sign here. When you add a hash sign after this cell reference, what the sign indicates is that you are not dealing with the cell D60, you are dealing with the array that starts at D60, right? It's not a cell, it's an array, a dynamic array. So when I press enter, you notice that it pulls me both the data points, right? And tomorrow when I add euro, because now this array is going to give me all the three values, this formula pulls out all the three values. So how does Excel generate a dynamic array? So there are certain functions built in which are meant for dynamic array, right? Like offset, index. I'm not going into functions. Function is not the target here. So these functions are built to generate array. So those functions work. Filter, unique. There are new set of functions that have come. I'm not touching upon them. There are lots of people who are already talking about this. We are going one step above that. So how do I make other functions to give an array? So if you look at it normally, in a VLOOKUP function, if you think of it, this D60 is expected to be a scalar value, right? The lookup value is supposed to be one value, it's a scalar. FX rate is an array, right? FX rate is supposed to be an array, so let's leave it, but this D60 is supposed to be a scalar. In the place of a scalar, if you give an array or a vector, I'm giving D60 hash, the result will be, what Excel is going to do is for every single item in this D60, it will do this VLOOKUP and will produce the answer. So wherever a scalar is supposed to come, if you pass a vector or a matrix, then for every single element of that vector or a matrix, the same formula will run and the answer will come out as a vector or as a matrix. Is it clear? Any questions? So now what we can do? Yeah.
Can this hash be used in a normal VLOOKUP also, or no? Okay.
I mean, hash sign in the sense, for example, what I had also wanted to clarify is when you use a hash sign, see an hash sign, I can use it in this case, because in this case, one formula, C25 to C27 produced all the three values, correct? Yeah. So here, if I use a hash sign, if I say, let me just pull the same set of values, E25 hash. What does that E25 hash, what does it do? It pulls out all the values that were generated by that one formula. E25 has one formula that pulled out all the three values. I'll get all the three.
Okay.
But if you look at it, I see something for a naked eye, it looks the same here. Right? In here, if I use a hash function, it won't work. Why? Because this, I mean, it works, but it gives me only that one single cell's value.
One single cell.
It's all three cells. Why? Because this cell produced only one cell, right? It didn't give me all the three. So here, when I use a E11 hash, it just gives me that one single value. It doesn't give me all the three values, right?
So it doesn't have the element, I mean, that property of the array. That's why.
It doesn't have an array. It's a scalar item. So it's a scalar item. Okay. So it gives the scalar value.
So basically what you just talked about earlier at the outset, as in terms of using scalar formulas, would mean that we would have to replicate the same formula. Though we would be using hash, we would have to replicate it as many number of times the scalar formula is used. But on the other hand, if it was a vector formula used, a combination using the colon, basically specifying a series of rows or columns, by using the hash, we'd be able to apply it. By using it one time, it will actually be applicable over the entire set of cells that the vectors would have generated. Vectors or matrix would have generated the output. Is that correct? Am I understanding it correctly?
Absolutely right. right?
Thanks for
And
that.
here adding the hash sign doesn't add value. I mean, if you can add the hash and copy paste it, but adding the hash sign really doesn't add value, because whether I add the hash or, if in a scalar, whether you add the hash or not add the hash, you don't have a problem. But yeah, we did have a problem earlier when the dynamic array was released earlier. If I had put E11 hash, where E11 is not a dynamic array, Excel would have thrown an error saying that, it's a scalar, you can't use a hash sign. They made a upgrade a few months back where if it's a scalar, it just pulls out that one single value. Sometimes that might be required for us. Right? One more small thing, in a scalar, keep in mind, when I gave E25 hash, see the formula in E25 produces all the three answers. E26 doesn't have any formula, right? If I tried E26 hash, I'll get a reference error. It'll say, this reference is invalid because E26 doesn't have a dynamic. It has no formula there, right? E26 is an empty cell, right? All right. Okay, I just got it. All right. And one more thing is, what if, just to, which I should have explained a little earlier, what if, let's say, one formula produces all the 9 answers? What if, let's say, my 9 cells were not free, right? What if I had something blocking the path? I just put a dot here. So this formula is supposed to give me 9 answers, but something is blocking my path. What happens? In that case, Excel will throw a spill error saying that, this date, I need 9 rows, 9 cells, but I don't have clean path for this. What you can do is clear the path or insert some additional rows and columns. It will automatically flow. In general, what I do is, if I think a dynamic array could grow vertically, then I don't keep any calculations at the bottom. I keep all of them at the top. That's why you notice that, even the exchange rate is on top. Similarly, if I think the dynamic array can grow horizontally, then I don't keep anything to the right. I keep everything to the left, right? The right, I generally keep it free. All right. So that means you also have to, when you're working with tables and dynamic arrays, you have to organize your sheets better.
One question here. So generally, we as chartered accountants, anybody, we would want to see totals. So what you're just saying is, rather than having the totals at the bottom, we should have it immediately after the header, say, or maybe a row above or below, as per the design requirements.
It can even be below. It can even be below the header, but it should be above the array. So the total should come somewhere here.
Yeah, okay.
Right. So in this case, what I'll have is, I'll probably have a total column right here. Okay. So now what I can do is, I can simply get this answer as, in this case, since the exchange rate has been obtained with one formula, I'm going to take C62 hash, because C62 is an array, dynamic array with one formula, divided by D59 hash multiplied by our conversion factor, right? Because these are in crores and I want the answer in millions, and I've got the answer here, right? So this is, as easy as this. I would not even have this helper row. I would frankly not even have this helper row. I can directly use this VLOOKUP inside the formula. Let me just, instead of D59 hash, let me put that formula right here. Press enter. You've got the answer. Okay. And where we'll see the impact is mainly, once you've designed it, designing this takes time, right? Designing this takes time. There are 2 areas where you will see a very big impact of working with dynamic arrays and vector operations. One is dynamic array is complicated also. I'll come to that shortly, why it's complicated. Certain things it's not very easy. I'll give you an example shortly. But where does the advantage come? One is in the formula. See, keep in mind, Excel is not a calculation, doesn't have its own calculation engine, right? It's not a programming language. It's an application. It's not a C++ or a, C hash or .NET. All the calculations happen at the back end. So when you give a formula like what we gave earlier, for every single formula, Excel has to take this value, go to the back end, do the calculation, come back here. And it has to figure out, when I change this one cell, which all cells will change. It has to figure out, go back, redo this, take those cells, go to those cells, then go to the calculation engine, do the calculation, come back. It takes time. Whereas here, this entire calculation is in one single formula. So Excel will take this formula, go to the backend engine, do the calculation, come back. It's much faster, right? It's pretty fast. I mean, I can assure you that some of the projects we worked on very recently, one client had a file which was 200 MB. A client couldn't even open the file with their system, right? I had a fairly powerful laptop. It took 15 minutes for me to open. We modified everything with dynamic array. The file was opening in like, I mean, you wouldn't even notice that there was it was doing billions of calculation, right? It was doing billions and billions of calculation. It would just open, right? Very quickly. The file was like 200 MB file came down to 3 MB literally, right? Because it's not, Excel is not remembering 9 formulas here or 12 formulas. It's remembering only one formula. So one place where you will see the impact is speed and performance. Another one is in terms of error proofing. A lot of them, in my personal experience, what I notice is, when we build Excel file first time, that goes through check. You build a model, you check it, your boss checks it, your client checks it, there's a call, people discuss it. But later on, when people have to update it, nobody checks it. We just assume that, because you took 1 month time to create a file and then check it and everything. And now month end is happening. I'm updating the file. Nobody has the patience to spend another 1 month to check it. And no checking happens. And in my experience, that is where a lot of mistakes happen. When you build a file, the file is fine. Subsequent updates is where all mistakes happen. When you build models like these, what is going to happen is I am going to avoid the issues with dynamic array. So let me just put something here. Let me add this buns.
No, let's have cakes. Buns khali hai, taste nahi aa raha usme.
All right, let's go for cakes, right? I've got cakes. Let us say I sold 200 units at whatever price, let's say 120. My tables got added, that's one thing, but look at it, my dynamic array got added, right? So I could just give this to a job to an intern and say, punch this data. Hopefully the intern will not make mistake in punching it, and somebody has to obviously check the inputs. And similarly, if my exchange rate adds, let me add an exchange rate. I added one and it's already in place, right? Things happen pretty fast here. But dynamic array is not so easy. Some very simple task gets complicated. What is that? So for example, I want to get summation. Now the problem with summation is, see, some function doesn't expect you to give a scalar quantity. Some function expects you to give a vector. So if I want column-wise summation, I can't use a sum function because the sum function will sum all the values and give it to me. So how do I get column-wise summation? You could either use matrix multiplication or some new functions have been brought in for that. One of them is a new lambda function. I could use that. I could say now by columns. I'm not explaining this lambda, but just to illustrate that, why this sometimes could get complicated. A simple column-wise summation. This is the formula I'm writing here, right? So some of these formulas get tricky, right? Something as, I just want to do a simple summation, YK or running total. If I want to do a running total, things can get tricky here. How do I get, what I want is 384 or 2880 plus 5400. I want to add them. This again gets a little tricky, but again, thankfully, Microsoft Excel has plugged a lot of these things and they've got some new functions for this, which are not intuitive at all. Right? They are not at all intuitive, but you have these functions like these things which will plug these problems, and certain things will require you to work with some advanced mathematics, but it can handle all these issues in itself. Right? So this is what dynamic array can do for us. And before I move on, I'll just very quickly give you a very, what I talked about here is just a very small illustration. I mean, I gave you this data, but just to give you an idea of what all it can do, what is its real power, let me show that to you here. This is just beginning. Okay, what I talked about dynamic array is just the beginning. Now I have here with me a bunch of assets bought at different dates at different costs, which has different life and different salvage value. So imagine think of making a fixed asset schedule for these things. Every asset, I have so many assets, and the asset list can keep growing, right? In future also it can keep growing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a nice schedule 6 or a financial statement report for this with one single formula. I'm going to say, of course, this formula, I created the formula, but the core basic for this is dynamic array, and for that the basic is vector operation. I'm going to, this is my original cost. And this asset as these are my its salvage values. When did I buy it? I bought it on these dates. Here is the estimated life. And I want this model from, let us say 21 is gone. I bought some assets in 21, but 21 is gone. I'm building a forecast. So I want this from 2022 for next 5 years. Give me a forecast for 5 years. And I want all the values in thousands because these numbers are very huge. I want all the values in thousands. I'm just giving one formula. I press enter. My schedule is done. Right? I have not good because this involves complex mathematics, of course, but the fundamental foundation is dynamic array. And what I was showing you briefly, the lambda functions.
Vishwanath,
You want it for 10 years, big deal, just change it to 10.
Vishwanath, we asked for Excel function, Baba. We didn't ask for a magic show.
Right. But this is starting with, the biodynamic array. That is what is helping us do this. So think of this in future, how things can evolve. I'm not talking about distance future. I have a lot of functions like this already built in. In future, if you want to build a fixed asset schedule, this is all you need to do. What people might be spending ages to create, one formula and you're done, right? And if you want to buy more assets, no big deal. I mean, right now, what the way we do it, if you buy one more asset, you need somebody to go and create a schedule, and that schedule has to be linked up to your income statement, balance sheet, cash flow, everything. I don't need to do that here. So if here, let me add some asset in 2025. Let me add something here. Let's say I'm going to buy a machinery in on 15th March 2025. Right. Or even this is not required actually, because this is, let's say it's a startup and I'm just giving a plan. I will buy it in the 60th month and this formula will take care of it. So if I'm going to buy it in the 60th month or 49th month, I got the answer. What is the price? I'm going to buy something for, let's say 500,000. 60 and its salvage value is going to be 20,000. The moment I added this 500,000, you notice that, the data is flown into my model, right? Again, as I said, throw this work to an intern. Your intern, I mean, once this is built, now this is a job for an intern to handle things. I don't need a full-fledged analyst to come and work on this, right? More importantly, mistakes can be avoided, right? More than anything, the biggest thing is, because next time when this asset gets added, who will ensure that you create the correct schedule for this machinery as well? Because I checked for the last 40 assets I checked. Now you're adding one more. Am I going to spend time checking it? Am I going to ensure that you've checked it, linked it correctly to your P&L and balance sheet? Now I don't have to do anything. It's all automatically happening, right? That's what we can do with dynamic array. So I just give you a small example here, right? This is the basic starting point, but what we can do is far more when you work with dynamic array. All right. Any questions?
You mentioned you will be teaching us about the NGO and that sort and
Yes,
filter. By the way, it's too much to absorb. We just had a comment from one of our members.
Yes,
Too much to
I just
absorb in one short session. But we would really like to see how we would be able to do the NGO and the sort, just to be on the safe side.
Yes,
Because
that's
that was
what we are
one of the
going.
earliest questions that was asked by one of our other members as well.
Okay. So that's where we are going, right? So we understood the principles, but dynamic array, as I told you, is a little bit complicated mathematically, some of them, right? A simple summation we saw, or a running total we saw was getting complicated. So sometimes, people have this problem with dynamic array. Even today, there is among those of us who have adopted these vector operations and everything, there's a debate going on, power query or dynamic array. So that's what I'm going to do. What is this power query or power pivot data models? But before I go into that, let's talk about, just working with tables. This is something will come a little lighter. So what are we going to do here? How do we work with tables here? That's what I'm going to do. And this is something that is possible very well only when you're working with Office 365. In the older version, we didn't have such powerful functions. So normally what is going to happen is, when you're working with Excel, most of our formulas depend on where your data is, right? Not based on what your data is. And that's where I'm going to give you this example. So let us say I have Sensex value from 1st July till 30th July. Sensex is, the Indian Bombay Stock Exchange Index. Now, what I want to do is very simply calculate daily price growth, right, in percentage. So I'm going to take today's value. Normally, how would you do it? Take second day's value divided by first day's value, previous day's value, minus 1. This is a table here. So I type formula in one cell, it automatically happened. Day 1, there is a problem because for day 1, there is no previous day, right? For now, let's ignore that, right? You can use a if error or if NA on top of it. For now, let's ignore that. Now, this is how we work. Now, what is the problem with this is, as I told you, this depends on where your data is. Now, this answer would be correct. For my 7th, I'm getting answer for 6th. 7th divided by price of 6th minus 1. I'm getting correct answer. That's because 6th is exactly placed 1 row before 7th. What if tomorrow people change the order of the data? Let us say I want to look at this data based on, I just want to sort this data from the highest to lowest value of Sensex, right? So my team comes here and they sort the data. Now what is happening? Our formulas have gone for a toss. 7th July is now not getting checked with 6th July, right? It is not. We are not checking it with 6th July. We're checking it 16th July. Why? Because 16th July has now come on top of 7th. So when you give you a formula based on where your data is, our Excel file becomes very sensitive. Inserting a column, inserting a row, everything can make your file go for a toss, right? These are all problem for us. So what do we do about this? Now, this is not in a way it's a vector operation, but I'm going to just take 2 scalar values. But how do I make a sort-proof formula? So when you're making a sort-proof formula, here is the underlying rule. Rule number 1 is you can take data only from 2 sources. Data should either come from the same row, or if your data is horizontal, here the data is vertical. If it's horizontal, then column, right? If data is placed horizontally. So it has to come from the same row or column, or data should come, you should refer to, either refer to data in same row, right? Or refer to the entire vector or matrix. This is the rule here. There are some small exceptions. I'll come to that. So what do I mean by that? So what I'm going to do is, if I want today's price by previous day, I am not going to use today by previous day. I didn't explain a formula called XLOOKUP. I'll very briefly explain you the XLOOKUP for those of you who probably haven't used it already. What does the XLOOKUP do? So for example, if I want to pull out the price on 6th July 2021, it's almost like it's going to work like a VLOOKUP. So you specify the lookup value. In VLOOKUP, you select the entire table. Here you don't select the entire table. You select the lookup column. Look for 6th July. Where do I look for? Look for the date column. And you specify where to pull out the data from. The data has to come from the Sensex column. Now this XLOOKUP pulls the data. It's almost like VLOOKUP. Now what if the data doesn't exist? Let's say I'm looking for a data for 4th of July. Now 4th July doesn't exist in my list. So it gives you an error. In this case, when 4th July doesn't exist, what do we want? I want data for 3rd July. And 3rd July is also not there. So I want data for 2nd July. So what you can do is leave the 4th parameter. 4th parameter is supposed to meant for something else. I'll talk about that later. In the 5th parameter in XLOOKUP, you can say, if the exact match is not there, a -1 here represents, if the exact match is not there, go for the next smaller item. So now what I'm going to do is this. I am going to say, take today's value, divide by what? I know 1st July can be either on top or at the bottom. It can be anywhere. I don't know where it can be. So I am going to use XLOOKUP. And I'm going to take today's value -1. Look up for what? Previous day. And how do I say previous day? Previous day would be 1 day before today.
No,
right?
it won't be at the rate growth, right? It will be at the rate Sensex.
Oh yeah, you're right. You're right. You're right. Absolutely right. Yeah. At the rate Sensex, to take today's Sensex and divide it by what? Go for X lookup. Look for previous day's price. How do I say previous day? Previous day would be today -1. And look up where? In the date column and pull out what? Sensex. It's going to throw error. Why? For some of the dates, it'll throw an error because the previous day doesn't exist. For 5th July, the previous day is 4th July. That doesn't exist. So I have an error. So what we can do, like what we just saw, put a comma, comma, -1. So this is today's price by previous price -1. For those of you who don't know, in Excel, you can break your formula into multiple lines. So sometimes when my formula gets too lengthy, this is what I do. Alt enter. Alt enter will break your formula into multiple lines. The formula will absolutely work fine. There is no issue. So today's sales divided by previous day sales -1. I've got the answer. Again, day one, we have a problem because previous day doesn't exist before 1st July, right? You could use a FNA or something for that. Now this data, because we are specifying it as, today divided by previous day, let's just notice what we are getting here. 0.37% is for 7th July. Let's just memorize it for maybe for now. Let me sort the data by Sensex. So 7th July, this one still gives me 0.37%, right? I still get the correct data. You can do anything with your data. You sort the data whatever way you want. I don't care. My formula is going to work, right? This makes our file far more reliable because, these are all things that mess up our Excel file. When we created, we didn't think somebody will insert the row, or some analyst created it. They left the job. A new analyst came in. The new analyst didn't know about the risk, inserted a column, and your file stops working now, right? And all of us are happy to blame the previous analyst. Maybe it's probably correct to blame the person. The person didn't foolproof the file, but the damage is done to us, right? We are the ones who are suffering. The damage is done. When you build a file like this, it doesn't matter. I mean, you can do it in whatever way you want. We'll still get the correct answer. All right. So this is how we can handle, sort proofing. So this again is a vector operation. As I told you, why this vector operation is because either I select data from current row or the entire vector. I am not going to choose cell A1, B1. What is the exception? One exception is sometimes if you're not using tables, right? Because in a table, what is going to happen is tomorrow, if a 1st August comes in, I probably didn't explain this. When you have a 1st August coming in, my formula automatically expands, right? My formula automatically expands. And you notice that, everything is in place now. So when I refer to a table, I said date column, the table automatically expands. So date automatically expands, everything expands. But there are people who don't like to work with tables. In that case, I don't encourage it, but one exception sometimes you may want to do is, rather than referring to the entire vector, you can say from top till current row. That reference is sometimes okay, right? From top till current row, is it's second best, I would say, right? I would not recommend that, but if at all you think, okay, I can't refer to the entire row, this is one thing you can do. I'll not go into that because I think we don't have time to cover the other things. So
just one point, since you did mention that, Vish, if we do use that as an option, and if somebody were to sort the data, then there could be a possibility that it might give a wrong answer. So just like the growth column, which does not necessarily give the right answer, if we use from top to current, maybe the date has gone below, and then we might end up with a wrong value or error or something of that sort. And if we use the error proofing in the say, if error uses 0, that means that value will not necessarily throw up.
Correct. So, this is not a use case for the top till current row. This definitely is not a use case for top till current row. If time permits, I'll show you one use case, which is only for relative reference, not for tables, which is only for relative reference. Sometimes you may want to use that, not for tables, but I generally don't encourage that. This is how I work. For me, either current cell or the entire vector. You can't choose previous cell, previous row or next row, because what is next, what is previous can change. Current row will not change. 14 July 52,904, that's not going to change. But what comes before 14 July, what comes after 14 July, that's can change when people sort the data. All right. Now let's talk about, what is the other approaches that we can use. Firstly, in this case, let me take the same data point, what I had here. How do I create a, let us say, an app kind of working without dynamic array, right? Maybe I don't want to work with a dynamic array, but if data gets added, I want everything here to get added. What is the other choice for me? The other choice is a low code solution with what is called as Power Query. See, dynamic array, many Excel experts are also like, you don't see them talking about it. They all talk about Power Query because it requires you to think mathematically. We are finance professionals, we deal with numbers. For us, this is a different story. But when you talk about people from other streams, for them, dynamic arrays could be a nightmare because they can't handle everything mathematically there. What is the other option? Let me touch upon this same thing, then I'll go to the donor thing. One thing you can do is you can work with what is called as Power Query. Again, this is just going to be a teaser of sort or introduction and making you familiar to it, right? Obviously, in 2 hours, there is, we won't be able to cover everything. But what can I do here with Power Query? So what I'm going to do is right now, my table only covers 4 products, and in exchange rate, let me have only 3 here. I'm going to load this data to Power Query. So there is something called as Power Query where you can go to the data section, right? How did I load it to Power Query? I'll repeat that once more. So I selected for Power Query, your data has to be in table form necessarily. It has to be in table, only then you can use Power Query. Go to the data tab and click on get and transform data. It reads from table or range. If your file has not been fully updated, it may, if your Excel is not fully updated, it may read as from sheet, especially if you're using Office 16 or Office 19. It would read as from sheet. And those of you who are using Office 19 can perhaps follow this trick. So I'm going to add this from table or range. So this table has got loaded here. Let it be there as it is. I'm fine with this table, right? I don't have anything to do about this table. And next thing I'm going to do is I am going to take this exchange rates. Sorry. I have too many files open. Let me close it. Okay, let me close this. Let me close this file. Or I can pull it from, let me close this Power Query. Now I'll also load this exchange rate to my table, right? So we've got the sales loaded here. What it's doing, I'll explain it shortly. Now I'm also going to load this exchange rate into this table. Right? We have added to both the values here. Let me also for now close this as well. See, what I would like to do is right now talk about, before I finish the step, talk about cross tab and what is called as cross tab and what is called as data normalization. I'll just briefly talk about that. See, these reports that we created, these are all called cross tab reports, cross tabulation. It's in matrix form. So in here also, when I was giving you this donor list, this is a cross tabulation. In a cross tabulation, it's easy for end user to read. It's easy for end user, but it's not machine friendly. So for an end user, when you see 5,700, what is it? It is January amount contributed by Reliable Inc. for sanitary fund in January 21. That is what you see here. It's easy for us to read. It is not easy for machine to read because machine doesn't know where for the month. Machine doesn't know where to look for the fund details, where to look for the donor. Machine has no idea. Now, what is a normalization? A normalized data looks like this. So Reliable Inc. January Sports Fund 5,900. Reliable Inc. January Sanitary Fund 5,700. So now machine knows what is this 5,700. Machine can easily read because all the data that's required to know what this 5,700 is in the same row. So machine can easily read this data. So a normalized form is the best form as far as Excel is concerned, right? For data analytics is concerned. Now, what I'm going to do is, are we clear here? Any questions? Okay. So we have 10 minutes. I think that should be perfectly good enough. Maybe we'll slightly extend by 5 minutes if possible, if need be. So let me go back to the Power Query. So how do I go back to the Power Query? I'll go to Data, Get Data, and go to Launch Power Query Editor. This is where I am. Now what I'm going to do is, I want this data to come normalized. So milk biscuit, Indian rupee, what is the sales? Milk biscuit, USD INR, what is the sales? I want to create a table like that. So what I'm going to do is, let me do one thing. I'm going to create a third table, which will come like this: milk biscuit USD, milk biscuit INR, milk biscuit, not INR we probably not have, but milk biscuit USD, milk biscuit GBP, and milk biscuit Euro. We'll have that line. How is it going to come? I'm going to merge the two columns here, and I'm going to create what is called as Cartesian join. So let me duplicate this table. So I'm creating a duplication here, and I'll call it as, let's say, combine, something like that. I'll remove this column because I only want the currency. Again, as I said, and I'm not teaching this to you, I'm just giving you, exposing you to this, that something like this is possible. I'll add a column here. So I'll go to Add Column tab. I'll click on Custom Column. And in the custom column, what I'm going to do is, I'm going to, what should come here is equals, pull me data from the sales table, right? So let me for now just say, pull me data from sales table, and I'll call this as product. So it says, what do I pull from sales table? I mean, for USD, there is nothing corresponding to USD in the sales table. So it says, what can I pull? I'm going to say, do one thing. There are lots of values there. It doesn't know what to pull. I'm going to say, what you have to do is expand. And how do I say expand? Click on this button. Keep in mind, I'm not typing much formula here. In custom, I said equal sales. That much I typed. And I'm going to say, I want you to expand and bring what all columns? Bring product column. That's enough for me now. I'll say product column, click OK. Right, I've got this here. So product column, milk biscuits, it's come. I'll call this as simply product. So now if you look at it, I have sales table, I have FX rates table, but I've got a combined table which tells me milk biscuits, USD, cream biscuit, USD, so on. And let me close this. Let me load this to Excel file. This has come here. So if I want sales in USD, let me just put it here. I will put value. What I'm going to do is, how do I get, so Power Query gave me this column, right? Power Query gave me this table. I didn't make this table. Why did I use Power Query? Couldn't have I copy pasted it? We'll see it in the next step or one step later. So I'm going to take the value here. How do I get the value? So I want Excel to go here. Let me, simple operation. I want Excel to look up milk sales, INR, pull out the INR sales from this table for milk biscuit sales, pull out the milk biscuit sales and multiply it with the USD exchange rate. And I'm going to give it using a X lookup or a V lookup, right? You could use it. I'll say, pull out milk biscuit sales for this product. I want to, this part is a little tricky, but it's still not mathematically complicated. It's just Excel. So I'm going to pull out the Indian rupee sales and multiply it with exchange rate. Which exchange rate? Do an X lookup for this. X lookup for this exchange rate in this exchange rate table and pull out the values. I've got this divided by 10 or conversion factor, whatever, I'll put it here. But this is not the report we want. Final output should be in a nice crosstab format, right? We wanted it like this. Now, how do I get this? Very simple. I'll go to insert a pivot table, right? When you have a table, all you have to do now is create a pivot table. For now, let me put the pivot table somewhere here. Click OK. And in the pivot table, what do I want? I want product, currency, and value. Right? We've got this. A question could be, should I take so much pain here? right? Sorry, I should have done division, not multiplication. I was wondering why the answers are not matching. I should have done a division here and multiplied by conversion factor. I did a wrong operation. Now, should I take so much pain? I mean, manually doing it with cell reference was easy, right? Scalar action was easy. Why should I take so much pain? Use Power Query, bring it and everything. Again, the idea is make sure your file is easy to maintain. Tomorrow, if my team adds this cakes and we add one more currency, right? Power Query and the pivot table is not so dynamic, but it's still relatively easy. All I have to do is come here, right click and click on refresh button. So I'll go to data tab and click on refresh all. And I'll have to refresh pivot table separately. So I have to right click and click the refresh button, which is a manual task, but that's all I have to do, right? Every time before I publish the report, I'll probably refresh all these tables and Power Queries. When I refresh it, you notice that AED got added, cakes got added. My pivot table now, because pivot table is based on the table, when the table got expanded, pivot table also automatically got expanded with that table source. And I've got the entire answer here, right? So this is again a vector operations that we are doing here. And the power of vector operation, as I keep insisting, is that makes your file very easy to maintain. Updating your file and all becomes a breeze. So whatever pain you took for, let's say, month-end closures or whatever in the month of January, February, all you have to do is right click and refresh and we are done. Okay. Now, let me also talk to you about any questions before we move on. We have 5 minutes. That's enough to finish this challenge. If time permits and if you're okay, I'll also show you one more small example so that there is one part about the pivot, power pivot part, which I didn't cover so far. But before that, any questions here? All right. Now let's do one thing. What I'm going to do is, I told you that I would be able to do certain calculations, that NGO analysis very quickly. How am I going to do that? For that, first requirement is you should have your data in a normalized form. I'll also explain to you what if your data is not in normalized form. What can I do? I'll also quickly show that. So I have my donor collections in normalized form. Every row will tell me what is happening. This expense normalized will also tell me what is happening, right? In fact, power pivot, I'll show you later. I earlier promised I'll do this without formula, but I'll maybe use some formula here. Now, how do I find out whether, for any of, actually I can do it without formula. It's not a problem. I just need one small interconnection section, which I didn't have earlier, which I'll just create in a moment. Just one moment. So if you look at it, what I have done is the same data we had earlier. I have arranged it like this. So every donation is organized like this. This is how I'm capturing the data. In fact, whether this is a CSR type donation, other donation is not in this table. It's in a different table, right? What kind of donor is this person? Similarly, for expense, I have the site, the fund, amount, and the month. This date is basically the month column. I have that here. Where are these sites? That data is in a separate table. Now, how can I do it all without using any formula? If you can get your data like this, a simple pivot table can do this for us by using the power of power pivot. And what I'm going to do is, because it's in table, I'm going to create table relationship. Again, this is going to be a teaser sort. I'm not really going to teach you, but this will expose you to what all are possible. So what I'm going to do is, this donor list here is the same as this donor list, right? Now donors, I've got a list of donors and what type they are. So these two matches. The funds here are the same funds I have in here. I'll also make one more small helper table which is the months. So I'll create a month table here. Right now I'm creating it in a ad hoc place. It should be, all the data point we have should be properly respected. I am not respecting them right now. I'm just keeping them here and there. Let me have the months here. So there is a unique list of months. Right, months are basically 1st January. I'm making this into a table. I have a unique list of funds. The slum is where, in which city, that data is right here. Donor data is here. So if you look at my data, if somebody were to ask you, okay, what is the sum of CSR sales right now? What would you do? You'll probably add a column here and do a VLOOKUP to find out CSR. Then you can do a pivot table, right? You'll do a column where you'll do a VLOOKUP based on donor, and then so that I can pull out this type. Now I'm not going to do a VLOOKUP. What I'm going to do is I'll go to the data tab. I'm going to create what is called as relationship. This relationship is powered by Power Pivot. Now, what I'm going to do is I'll add one relationship here. I'm going to say, now, in this table, I'll name these tables properly. Right now, even I don't have proper name. So donations, this table is called as table 4. I'll call it as donors. Here I have this table is called as spend table. This is slums. This is funds. And these are months. There is a formatting issue. It's coming as 44,316. It's just formatting. This is what I'm going to do. I'll create a relationship here. Data. If you don't like pivot tables, if you find this complicated, you can even use sum ifs. But of course, for that you have to make a flat table. You have to use VLOOKUP and pull the data there. But I'm going to say, in the donations table, you see a donor name. This donor name is the same as the donor name you see in the donors tab. I'm telling Excel that, match this. Next thing I want to say is, you see a fund name here. There are multiple funds here, because what I want to do is I want to link this fund and these funds here. But the problem is Excel will not know which to link with what. Because here also multiple times nourishment fund comes. Here also multiple times nourishment fund comes. So it doesn't know which to link with what. So how do I make sure that, this fund name and this fund name are related? How do I bring it? That's where I'm having the helper table here. I'm going to link that fund table to this fund table. Let me do that. Data. Relate. In the donations table, there is a fund name. In the funds table, I have a fund name. Match them. They two are related. And I'll also create one more. In the spend table also, there is a fund name. That fund name also, link it with this fund. So I don't know how X is directly related to me, but I know I'm related to Y and X is related to that Y. So we both are related. We know that now, right? That's the kind of relationship we are creating. And I'll also link the month. So the month in my donation table as a month, because I want to do analysis by month. I want to compare spend for a month with donation for a month. So I will do one more thing. I'll say, this same thing. How do I link it? I create a months table and there is a month there. These two are linked. And one more relation. I'm just clicking the buttons here. Keep in mind, I got tables and I'm only clicking buttons here. I'm not typing any formula here. In the spend table also, there is a month. Basically, I'm linking all the columns. It's not called month. It's called date. It's okay. The heading can be different, but I'll tell Excel to make sure that it knows what the table is. And the last relationship I have to create is in the spend table, you have the slum name or the site name. And in my slums table, I have told you, there is a slum column. This site and the slum are matched. I'm telling Excel to map all these things. Excel has done this. Now that we have created the entire relationship, it's going to take me a few minutes to answer any questions that you want. What I'm going to do is let me create a quick pivot table out of this. Insert pivot table. Now, The pivot table is not a normal pivot table. We are going to use the power of power pivot. I'll show you what is this power pivot shortly. But how do I explore the power pivots power? For that, you have to choose add this data to the data model. Click on that. I wanted to make a table, but for that, from this table, but not just this table. There are so many interconnected tables. I want to do it from all of them. So I'm going to choose add this data to the data model. Click OK. Now there is a pivot table. What we wanted, I wanted to know, month-wise spend versus income, So let me drag the month, where to drag the month from, not from this table. I'll go to my months table, because there I've got the unique months, pull out all the months. Jan to December. I'm surprised there's a blank month there. We'll have to correct that. That's okay. And what do I want? I want donations for each of the month. Where will I get it from? In the donations tab. Amount. Right. And I want it also by the funds, by the way. It's not just month. I also want it by funds. So let me drag from the funds table. I'll also put the fund below the month. So month-wise, fund-wise, I want the data, or fund can go on top. Fund-wise, I want this data. Okay, we'll see what is happening here. One second. The months is supposed to have only one column. Something went for a toss there. What happened? Let me redo this probably from scratch. Just one moment. We got all the 12 months. I don't know why the months vanished. Insert pivot table. Add this to the data model. I want data from all the tables. From the months table, drag the month. Yeah, I've got this. Then I want to break it by fund wise. So from the funds table, drag the fund. So for each fund, I've got the months. What values I want? In the donations table, I have donations data, the amount. And in the spends table, I have amount there. I want that. So I've got both here. And if maybe books and stationery fund, I didn't get it for all the months, probably. There is some mismatch among our months, I think. March to December, there is a mismatch. We will fix it. That is not a problem. It will take me a minute to fix it. But I've got this here, and what I'm going to do is
I think they're getting clubbed together in the blank option, which you just mentioned earlier.
Yeah. So what is happening is, what is happening is, because in my dates here, these are all 1st January. These are all, first is what I'm seeing here. Whereas what I've got here is all, some of them are 1st and some of them are 31st. We can fix it, but for now, I'll do one simple thing. I will take everything into, I'll have a very quick fix in 1 second. Just a moment. So I'll make everything into last month of a date. So that will make our life very simple.
I think you'll have to use 1st month of the day.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, that also can be done. To get the first, so that I don't have to play with all the tables. So here also, let me do one thing. So that I get 1st month. So because it was 1st and 31st, it couldn't map it. It was putting that as, there was a small date mismatch because I created it here very quickly. So now we are fine, actually. Yeah. So if I refresh this, thing should be fine now. Right. So I have the data here book-wise. Now, if you're going to ask me, I want running total, right? So each month, how much I collected, I have. But one of the questions was, in terms of running total, did I overspend anywhere as compared to, let's say, what I thought? Pivot table as an option where I can go and say, I want to show value as a running total. All right. So the base build is going to be a running total by months. Yeah. So I have the running total for the expenses. Sorry, this is the donation. And I'll have running total for months here. So this is basically donation and this is the spend. Observe it, right? And if need be, I can add a calculated column here. But for that, you need to use what is called as measures actually. So I'll have to use something called a measure. That could be a little tricky here. So I will have to put it as equals. Yeah, that's going to be, I have to explain DAX function for it. So I'll not go into that for now, but I can use that here, right? I can use that through measures. I can create a donation minus spend if you wanted to add an extra column, because I don't want to manually go and do this. That would not be a good idea. We don't want B5 minus C5. That's a quick fix solution you can do, but ideally it should be done because you're using Power Pivot. You have to do it with measures where I can say, no, I want spend minus donation, and we can get this. But for now, if you want to observe something, this is all you have to observe. Right now, I could use the same thing. If somebody says, I want to know how much, let us say, running total of funds given by, let us say, a particular donor, right? Not from a fund perspective, I want donors perspective. Big deal. I mean, just remove the funds and go to the donors list and track the donors. Right? I have got that. And if you say, no, not donor, I want it by donor type. How much of this money came from CSR? How much came from others? We are done. Really, nothing much to do here. Right? You want to see it as a proportion. Again, you can, there are a lot of options here where you can say, I want to see this value as a proportion of grand total. Right? Spend, of course, will not make sense because we are talking about donations here. I have all the answers. This is all it takes for us to create this, right? So out of total donations, CSR donation in January accounted for 2.43% of total donation we received in the year. Once you create this relationship, we are done, right? Very, very quickly. I don't know. I mean, can we take another 5 minutes? Is that okay? Or are we overshooting a lot?
No, it's not about overshooting. It's too much to absorb. So,
okay.
No, I don't mind you taking 5 more minutes or 10 more minutes also. I don't see a problem. The only thing is that it's already getting to a stage where people are overwhelmed. I myself am overwhelmed for sure. I used to think I was an expert in Excel, and I used to feel so. I'm humbled.
Right. I mean, what I just wanted to show is because when I show this, one natural resistance that comes is, but this is not how I get the data, right? Yes, the data, if it is like this, I can, it's awesome. We can just click. And you remember this, what I wanted to show is, remember, we didn't type a single formula to get this, right? We were just dragging and dropping and using Power Pivot and pivot tables, right? What is this Power Pivot? If you have enterprise version or professional plus version, you can also go and check the data, what is happening. For that, you have to go to the Power Pivot window and look at it. And in case if you want to use it with a formula, so in Power, all this relationship, all this magic is happening in Power Pivot. Power Pivot has this entire relationship that we created. It stores all the relationship. This Power Pivot is doing all the magic for us, right? You notice that, gives a nice representation of how the relationship is working in our file as well, right? But what I'm going to do is this, very quickly, what if my data is not given to me like this? My team did not give me the data like this. I got the data looking like what I showed you in the beginning. This is how they are maintaining. What do I do? One very small thing, this merge cell is a pain, right? Merge cell alone is a pain. That alone, I'll manually fix it to start with, right? I'll manually fix this merge cell. Other things can be taken care in no time. That's not a problem. Merge cell alone, I'll very quickly fix this. It won't take much time. I'm only going to do one, right? I'm not going to do all the tables. I'll just do this one table. So how do I, if my team gives me data like this, how do I convert that data to look like what we just saw here, right? Because if I need data to be like this to work out all the magic, that is where Power Query can help us. Power Query can help us. We saw one advantage of Power Query. This is another case where Power Query can help us. I'm going to create a copy of this sheet just so that we have a different sheet. What I'm going to do is, again, I'm not teaching here. I'm just giving a teaser. I'm going to select this area, make it as a table. For certain reasons, I'm going to leave the top row blank. Or let me select this and say, the heading is not there. Because why the heading is not there? Because the ideal set of heading I want to see is like this. Right? This is how I want to see the heading. I don't want to see what is there is not my heading. So I'm going to say that my data doesn't have a heading. Right? I'll say go to data, mark this as a table, insert table. This data doesn't have a heading. So Excel insert some dummy heading on top. Let it be there. I don't mind. I'm going to load this data into Power Query. Once it becomes a table, you can load it to Power Query. And in Power Query, I can do all the magic. Again, I'm not going to be able to explain everything in 2 minutes, right? I'm going to do some magic here. I'm going to say, let's transform this data. I'm just doing certain actions. I'm not really explaining. I'm just giving you, as I said, it won't take too much time to learn, but obviously I can't explain that in 2 minutes time. So I'm going to merge some columns here. I'll say, and again, I'm not typing a formula here. Keep in mind, I'm not typing any formula. I'm only I'll type one small formula maybe, right? And I'll transpose the data back and so when you want to normalize your data, we had a very ugly data. That was too much of a pain. One way you can normalize the data is through what is called as unpivoting. We all know pivoting. There is something called as unpivoting. What is unpivoting? We have a cross tab report, but I want the cross tab in a normalized form where everything should come in a lengthy list. I'm going to unpivot. So what I'm going to do is I want these two columns, right? Reliable Inc. and CSR, but January, February, March and all should come as row heading. It should not be column heading. What I can do is I'll select these two columns and I'll go to in Power Query. I'm going to say, unpivot all the other columns. And it is doing this unpivot. So if you notice, January nourishment fund 0, January book and stationery 0. Excel is giving that to me, or Power Query is doing that. But I would like to split this. I would like to not have date and nourishment fund in one line. I would like to split it. That also is easy. I can go and say, split it by where you see this colon. Split it. I should not have used a colon in the first place, but it's okay. So I've split this because there was timestamp also came in, which also came after colon. It got a little messy. That's okay. I'll get rid of that column, right? So I've got CSR reliable, date, which is the month, fund, amount. I don't want the ones with 0 because 0 means I didn't get any money. It's a useless row for me. So I can filter and I'll say, remove this. That's gone. This one, Excel is not recognizing this as date because it is not a date. It's looking at text. So what I would like to do is, first and foremost, I don't want the 0 zeros to come. I want only the pure dates. And again, I'm not going to use much of a formula here. I want to extract this date alone out. I'll select this column and I'll tell Excel that, I want to extract date out of this with some formula, but I don't know the formula. I don't know this Power Query language. Power Query I use M language. I don't know that. I'm going to add a column by example. I'll give you some example. You make out the formula yourself. I'm going to tell that to Excel. Power Query here. And I'll give some formula here, 1-1-20-21. This is the answer. I'm giving some examples to Power Query. In this row, I want 1-1-20-21 to come. Now Power Query has figured out. It's figured out that, what you need here is just the date part without 0. I'm fine. I'm happy with this. Click OK. This has come, but this is still recognized as a text. I'll ask it to recognize this as a date. I'll call this as a date. Let me get rid of this and fund. We are done. We've got the data the way we wanted. Right. And I'll close and load. No formulas. Right. I'm not doing any formula. I'm just clicking buttons here. Maybe on small basic formula somewhere I type. Otherwise, I'm just clicking the button. So my end user gives me a data like this. With Power Query, I can make it into a normalized form. Then with Power Pivot, right? These are all for those of us who don't want to use dynamic array. I showed you dynamic array at the beginning. Dynamic array can do these things. Again, dynamic array can work if data is properly given to us. Otherwise, with dynamic array, I can again make this. And if my data is given by my end user in a crosstab form, which is pretty ugly, with Power Pivot, I clean it to look like this. Sorry, Power Query. Then with Power Pivot, I create the relationship and I'm analyzing everything with a simple pivot table. No calculations, I mean, no formula whatsoever, right? And this is going to be dynamic. Why? Because I showed you earlier in Power Query, all you have to do is refresh, click the refresh button when the data gets added. Tomorrow, if January 2022, February 2022 data gets added, all you have to do is come here and right click, refresh. You're fine, you're done. Right? Go to data tab, click on refresh all, and then come and manually refresh your pivot tables. All the analysis are done, right? You can analyze this pivot table even with a lot more visual controls here. Right? If I want to know how much of this donation came towards which fund, because here I didn't put the fund, I'm going to know, I want to analyze all these things based on the fund. Yeah, for now that is fine. Right? I don't have too many fields for now. I just have one. So tomorrow I can visually go and I can have multiple slices also. I can visually go and say how much of this came towards nourishment fund, sanitary funds. You know, I'm creating pretty interactive analytics, powerful conclusions I'm giving to them with literally nothing. Right? No formulas, all happening because of the thinking process. So one is vector operations formula wise. So dynamic array, you can give, that involves you to think in Excel terms, think formulas. Some of the formulas are complicated, but very powerful. Another thing, if you think formulas are not my strong area, then you can go for Power Queries and Power Pivot. Only problem with Power Query and Power Pivot is if some Power Queries and Power Pivots are very, very, very sensitive to heading changes. You can't mess with heading there. The heading cannot be touched. I will just very quickly just take 1 second and explain that. In this case, let's say instead of quantity where we did this entire thing, which table did I use? I think I used this one. If I call it as volume, right, I change the heading. And if I change my data, then if I try doing this refresh, it's going to throw an error. It says, you know what, I was working with the quantity column. Now you've changed that, that column doesn't exist. So Power Query is very easy, low code, no formula, nothing, but it's pretty much sensitive to your column headings. You can't change the column headings, right? Dynamic array, because it's all Excel and I'm typing the formula and I will say, which column to take, column headings, it can handle, but it involves you to code and it involves you, some of them are also mathematically challenging, and it involves you to code properly. But again, both of them can help us get very powerful applications. I'll wind up with that. Sorry, I took almost 25 minutes more. I'm very, very sorry. I know it's what, 8 o'clock dinner time for many of you, right?
No, 9 o'clock.
Thank you for bearing. Oh, 9 o'clock. Okay.
No, but Vish, let me tell you something. Though it's 9 for us, it's 11:24 for you. So thank you. I don't have, I'm out of words. I'm sure all our audience, all our participants for today's session are in a similar state where, what is this? We were watching a movie going on, and there's one hero, Vish, doing all the magic on the screen under the Excel table. So it's similar to RRR, where we see Ram Charan and Junior NTR coming and doing a lot of things on the screen. We have Chinmoy Chatterjee mentioning, we would want to come back again. But before we go on to the vote of thanks and the other part, which is the Kahoot quiz, I have certain announcements to make. The first thing is, thank you all for patiently listening to us. Thank you, Vish, for running us through this session. Now, I'm sure a lot of the participants have a lot more queries. We will be given this session and what's happened. I'm sure Santosh would also agree with me in terms of having something which would add value to our members. So we would do a feedback session to our participants, get their feedback in terms of would they want to learn more or things. This is something that I have to speak with Santosh, and I'm sure participants would also be interested. If something of that sort were to happen, we'd reach out to you once again, and we'll be looking at you maybe running these courses. I know as part of your organization, as part of your consultancy services, you do trainings for various set of people. I'm sure our participants would be interested to learn more. With that, I would thank you, Viswanathan M B, CA Viswanathan M B, for this wonderful session. I thank the participants. I thank Zoom for allowing us to run the session perfectly fine without hiccups on its side. Technical thanks. Before we wind up the session, is it okay, Vish, if I can take control? We would have something which is part and parcel. I'm sure all our members are already overcharged with what's happened, but I think we should also give them one more opportunity in terms of some takeaways. There's a Kahoot quiz, which is part of our standard activity. So every member who's been here for this session, we give them an opportunity to sort of win a prize of a small token. One question which is there, I'm sure you'd be seeing in the chat, is please share recording. I know this is something that you do as a professional service and you do charge fees for this. Is this okay if we can share this to our members? This recording which is there on today's session, is that fine with you? If it's fine, we will be sharing the, we'll be putting it on a Google
Yes.
Drive, and we'll be sharing it with our members. I hope that's fine.
Yes, today's recording, not a problem. You can
Fantastic. So
share
thank you for that. Thanks, Vish, for giving that free takeaway. And apart from that, we'll be just going on to the Kahoot quiz. I just want all of you to switch on your browsers or go on to kahoot.it, whichever you have as part of your, I will be just sharing my screen and you'll be seeing the Kahoot pin appearing on the screen. So yeah, so we've got about 38 participants left. Those who want to get away with some prizes, please participate. Wish, you're free to stay or you're free to leave. The choice is yours, but those who want can participate.
Thank you, C.S. Sanamurthy. I mean, it was a pleasure, and I'm glad. I mean, I should also thank the participants who stayed back so late.
The reason I removed TJ was what we do is we have the members' name and membership ID. Those who are part of BCICAI are already aware of it. I'm sure that would be a participant from some other region. So we request you to please put in your membership number and your name, just like we've got the 4 gentlemen already on board. I request others to also participate. Just about 8 questions, 9 questions, and then you could win some prizes for the evening. Or I think just there are 5 people, we'll just stop it. We'll give the prizes to them for participation itself without even going into the quiz. I'm sure you really want to make a better part of the evening in terms of what you've already seen. You can also have the others participate. XCOM members can also participate. Munawar, I request you to please log out and log in again with your membership ID. I think you're not from BCICAI, so that's fine with us. Okay, it's okay. We have 33 participants. I guess we can have some more participate here, make it more lively. Otherwise, the 5 who are there would already take away the prizes. And I think that'll be a bit unfair. Fine, if that's what you guys wanted. Should I start the game? Should I start the quiz? You can just go on to the browser kahoot.it and enter the game pin 8105581. Or if you have Kahoot app, you can go into the app and enter this number over there. Choice is yours. We have 31 participants online. I think we can have some more participation here. I guess that's it. We start. All the best participants. Okay, we've got a few more coming in. I guess we start right now. So we first mentioned that Mr. Viswanathan M B is the founder and executive director of an organization. What's the name of the organization? Is it Profectus, Perfectus, Profector, or Perfector? We've got 6 of you right. It's Profectus. So we've got Suresh G on top, Shaibi, followed by Murli, Venkat, and Munawar. Question 2. So BCICAI second international conference was held on. We remember Santosh making this announcement at the start. Was it 18th of March, 25th of March, 31st of March, or 1st of April? So we've got 9 of those giving the right answer. Scoreboard has changed. Venkat has come up. Suresh Ji has come down. Murli and Ambika, with Devakumar coming on the scoreboard, leaderboard actually. So we saw Mr. Vishwanath talk about different architectures to work with Kahoot. Is it Scalar, or which did he not mention today? What was not included? Was it Scalar, CAC, table, or Tensor? Which is not included in today's discussion? That's correct. Tensor was not mentioned. So most of you guys have been paying attention. So Venkat's on fire. I hope not literally. Question 4. This is a multi-select, so you will have to choose more than one. It could be 2, 3, or 4. What were the points covered to understand the array operations? So vector operations between two similar type vectors, operating on a vector with a scalar data, operating on a row vector with column vector, operations between vector and matrix. Which was them? Was it one of these, some of these, all of these? You got to choose and understand this is double point. So there's a good chance to cover up if you made any errors in the previous 2 questions. 4 seconds to go. 3, 2, 1. All of them were mentioned. So everybody who selected any one would get some points. And we see the change in the scoreboard. Sanjeev Ji has just jumped on top of everybody, followed by Shaibi, Devakumar, Aruna, and Munawar. This is again a multi-select. This question again has got double points. You have to choose either one or more. So when we talked about a data architecture for vector operations, what is it dependent on? Organized input, data normalization, denormalized data, or organized output? What was the points which Viswanathan covered in his session? It could be 1, 2, or maybe more of them. Right. So first and second were the right ones. Third and fourth were not. So we've got 8 people who've given the right answers. Let's see the scoreboard. There's change. Shaibi has come up to the top, followed by Sanjeev Ji. Gentleman with the membership number 3,05,005 has come to the top, followed by Devakumar and Arunava. It's a true or false question. Power pivot and cube functions are this one of the architectures to work with the Excel. Is it true or false? Did he mention this in today's session? Yes or no? All of you have given 2 wrong. I think we need to pay more attention. Slight change in the scoreboard. Shaibi at top, followed by Sanjeev and Devakumar. Blood donation drive. Yes, Santosh did mention about this. When was it conducted? On 31st of March, 1st of April, 2nd of April, or on 30th of March? What day was it conducted on? So this requires members to be in the session from the start. That's correct. It was conducted on 1st of April. 6 of you have given the right answer. Slight change in the scoreboard. Second last question. So BCICAI football tournament will be conducted on, Santosh mentioned this at the start. Is it 15th April, 22nd April, 29th April, or 6th of May? All of these are Fridays. So which Friday was it mentioned by Santosh? 22nd of April. Again, we see a few members missing it out. So slight change in scoreboard, Devkumar coming up and Sanjeev having a strike of 3. Last question for the evening. Santosh did mention that the BCICAI Family Day will be held on what date? Is it 8th of May, 13th of May, 20th of May, or 13th of June? What was the day that he mentioned? "13th of May" is the right answer. And we have the final scoreboard. On third position, we have Devakumar. On second position, we have Sanjeev Mohabatra. And on top, we have Shaibi. Congratulations to the winners. And we do have 2 runners-up as well. Congratulations to all of you. I thank you all for having been here and patiently listening to CA Vishwanath. If any of you have any further questions or comments, please do let us know. And you know how to reach us. Message to the CA chairperson or to me. We will be more than happy to address your queries. And as our speaker has given us the permission to share this recording, we will be sharing that shortly via a Google Drive link. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, CA Vishwanath, for conducting this wonderful session. We look forward to learning more, and I'm sure based on the feedback, we'll be reaching out to you shortly. Thank you all. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
And good night to you, sir.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.